Art has a way of revealing truth. Sometimes it reveals masterpieces hidden beneath layers of paint, and sometimes it reveals the true nature of people who think wealth equals worth. My name is Sophie Turner, and I'm a senior conservator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or at least I was until my new mother-in-law convinced the board I was unsuitable for such a prestigious position. But what Victoria Blackwood didn't know was that forcing me out of the Met would lead me straight to the discovery that would shatter her carefully curated world. The day everything changed started like most Sundays at the Blackwood mansion, with thinly veiled insults over expensive wine. The occasion was my husband James's 30th birthday, and the grand house was filled with Manhattan's elite, all pretending not to stare at the gold digger who had married into their precious social circle. "Sophie, darling," Victoria called across the marble foyer, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "That's such an interesting dress. H&M, is it?" I smoothed the vintage dyer I carefully restored, a skill Victoria would never understand. "Actually, it's—" "James, darling," she interrupted, turning to my husband. "Morgan Stanley called again about the VP position. Now that certain distractions are resolved, perhaps you'll reconsider." By distractions, she meant my career. The career she'd successfully sabotaged with a few well-placed calls about my questionable background. After all, what could the daughter of an art professor possibly know about fine art? James shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his Rolex, a gift from his mother, of course. "Mother, we've discussed this. I'm happy at the gallery." A gallery owner, Victoria sighed dramatically, ensuring her voice carried to nearby guests. The Blackwood hair, selling paintings like a shopkeeper. And now married to a former museum, what was it again, dear? Assistant. Senior conservator, I corrected quietly, with a doctorate in art history and technical conservation from the Institute of Fine Arts. Yes, yes, she waved her hand dismissively. Well, at least you'll have something to occupy yourself with while James pursues a real career. Speaking of which, she turned to address the gathering crowd. I have an announcement to make. My stomach tightened. Victoria's announcements were never good news. James has been offered a position at Morgan Stanley's London office, she beamed, senior vice president, starting next month. Finally, a proper job for a Blackwood. The room erupted in congratulations. I turned to James, who looked as shocked as I felt. London? Next month? I haven't accepted, he started. Of course he has, Victoria cut in smoothly. The paperwork is all ready. And Sophie dear, don't worry about your little gallery job. I'm sure London has plenty of gift shops that need staff. The room tittered with polite laughter. I felt James's hand squeeze mine apologetically, but he remained silent. Just like he had when Victoria got me fired. Just like he always did when his mother bulldozed over our lives. Something inside me snapped. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the foyer, I've been meaning to ask about that lovely Picasso sketch in your hallway. Victoria froze mid-sip of her champagne. The replica? What about it? Replica? I smiled, years of academic training taking over. The paper aging is consistent with pre-1920 materials. The pencil strokes show the distinctive left-handed technique Picasso used in his early sketches. And that signature. I walked over to the small, simply framed sketch that Victoria had always dismissed as decorative. That's not a replica signature. That's original graphite. The room had gone completely silent. Nonsense, Victoria snapped. It's a print my grandfather picked up in Barcelona. Probably worth a few hundred at most. Actually, I continued, pulling out my phone to display a catalog photo. It matches a lost Picasso sketch from his Blue period, last seen in Spain in 1917. The art world has been looking for it for decades. I zoomed in on the distinctive corner marks. These conservation repairs, they match the documented damage from a 1912 exhibition in Paris. Victoria's face had gone pale. You have no proof. I supervised the authentication of a similar piece at the Met last year. I'd be happy to have my former colleagues examine it. In fact, I checked my watch. Dr. Chen from the authentication board should be arriving any minute. I called him this morning. You what? Victoria's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. Oh, didn't I mention? After you got me fired, I started freelance consulting. Dr. Chen and I have been documenting lost masterpieces for an upcoming exhibition. When I saw your replica last month, I knew it needed a proper evaluation. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through the now silent foyer. Victoria's prize artwork was about to be exposed as either a multimillion-dollar masterpiece or a very illegal forgery. Either way, her carefully controlled world was about to implode. James stared at me with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Sophie, is this real? As real as your mother's commitment to my career development, I replied sweetly. Shall we see what the experts say? The next few hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Chen and his team carefully examined the sketch, taking photos, samples, and measurements. Victoria alternated between trying to stop them and make it if the piece was authentic, and insisting it was real proof. Fraud that she'd been claiming it on insurance as valuable art. By midnight, the preliminary results were in. I sat in the study, watching Victoria's face as Dr. Chen delivered his findings. The preliminary authentication is positive, he announced. This appears to be Picasso's Lost Woman in Blue, circa 1917. A full report will confirm, but based on initial testing, this is unquestionably an original work. Victoria collapsed into a chair. That's impossible. Current market value, Dr. Chen continued, would be approximately $15 million. However, he paused, reviewing his notes. Given that this piece has been listed as lost for over a century, there are certain legal obligations regarding its provenance. Meaning, I added helpfully, the art world will have quite a few questions about how it ended up here, quietly hanging in your hallway. Victoria's carefully Botoxed face couldn't quite manage panic, but her voice shook. Questions? About whether it was properly declared when imported, I explained. About insurance valuations. About whether proper procedures were followed for handling lost artwork. The Met's legal team is particularly interested, given their upcoming exhibition on recovered masterpieces. James finally spoke up. Mother, what did grandfather tell you about this piece? Victoria's silence was damning. Perhaps, I suggested, standing to leave, we should discuss London another time. You seem to have more pressing matters to attend to. As we drove home that night, James was unusually quiet. Finally, he asked, How long have you known? About the Picasso? I suspected the first time I saw it. The composition was too perfect for a replica. But I needed time to research, to contact the right experts. No, he interrupted. How long have you known you were going to do this? I thought about the careful notes I'd been taking since Victoria first started her campaign against me. About the experts I'd quietly consulted, the documentation I'd gathered. Since the day your mother got me fired, I admitted, I just needed the right moment. He was quiet for another mile. Then, the London job. Doesn't exist. I finished. I checked. Morgan Stanley's London office isn't hiring at that level. Your mother was bluffing, trying to separate us. The city lights played across his face as he processed this. You know this means war with her. I smiled, thinking of the authentication papers that would soon rock the art world. No, James. This means she's finally going to learn what it's like to be treated as an imposter in her own world. The next morning would bring changes that would reshape not just the Blackwood family, but the entire art world's understanding of lost masterpieces. And Victoria was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the most money. It's the one with the most knowledge. The morning after the authentication, I woke up to find the art world in chaos. Lost Picasso discovered in Manhattan socialite's home screamed the New York Times headline. My phone had 47 missed calls from various museums, galleries, and news outlets. Your mother's on line 1, my former assistant at the Met texted. She's trying to reach the board about correcting a misunderstanding about your departure. Too late for that. The Met's board had received a detailed dossier last night about Victoria's interference in my career, along with evidence of her questionable art acquisition practices. Amazing how quickly people return your calls when you've uncovered a lost masterpiece. James was already up, watching CNBC's art market coverage. The Picasso's estimated value just hit $20 million, he said, handing me coffee. Apparently there's a bidding war starting between the Louvre and the Prado. They'll have to wait, I replied. The provenance investigation comes first. That investigation was already turning up interesting details. Victoria's father-in-law, the legendary Marcus Blackwood, had acquired several pieces during the post-war chaos in Europe. Some through legitimate channels, others not so much. The doorbell rang. A courier delivered a thick envelope. The preliminary authentication report from Dr. Chen. Inside was also a letter from the International Art Recovery Commission. They want to interview your mother, I told James, about her father-in-law's collecting practices between 1945 and 1960. James ran a hand through his hair. She won't survive this, the social humiliation alone. Like the humiliation of having your career destroyed, of being called a gold digger at every society event. I softened at his expression. I'm not trying to destroy her, James. I just want her to understand what it feels like to be questioned, judged, dismissed. Mrs. Blackwood Turner? A voice called from our intercom. This is Rebecca Chen from the New York Times. We've loved your expert commentary on the authentication process. And so it began. Within hours, I was doing interviews not as James Blackwood's social climbing wife, but as Dr. Sophie Turner, one of the country's leading experts in art authentication and recovery. The Met's board chairman personally called to offer me a new position, Director of Authentication and Recovery, with complete autonomy. Victoria, meanwhile, was facing her own media circus. Reporters camped outside the mansion, asking increasingly uncomfortable questions about the Blackwood collection's origins. You need to help her, James said that evening, showing me photos of his mother being chased by paparazzi. She's falling apart. I considered this. Actually, I think I know how to solve everyone's problems. But she'll have to trust me. After what you did. Because of what I did. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly. The next morning, I walked into the Blackwood mansion for the first time since the revelation. Victoria sat in her study, looking smaller somehow without her usual armor of social superiority. Come to gloat? She asked, not looking up. Come to offer a solution. I sat across from her. One that saves your reputation, preserves the Blackwood legacy, and actually does some good in the art world. That got her attention. The Picasso isn't the only questionable piece in the Blackwood collection. I continued. Your father-in-law's collecting practices are about to become very public. But I pulled out a proposal. What if the Blackwood family became heroes instead of villains? She took the papers cautiously. What do you mean? The Blackwood Foundation for Art Recovery and Restitution, a new organization dedicated to finding and returning lost art to its rightful owners or museums. Funded by the Blackwood family, led by experts in the field. You mean you? Among others. Instead of being accused of hiding stolen art, your family becomes instrumental in recovering it. The Picasso becomes the first piece in a celebrated restitution program. And my reputation goes from socialite with questionable art to philanthropist leading the charge for artistic justice. The press will love it. Wealthy family dedicates fortune to returning lost masterpieces. Much better headlines than what you're getting now. Victoria studied the proposal for a long time. Why help me, after everything I did? Because unlike you, I actually care about the art. These pieces deserve to be properly documented, preserved, shared. And I smiled slightly, because watching you have to publicly praise my expertise while funding my career will be much more satisfying than watching you fall. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the Blackwood Foundation's opening gala. The Picasso, now properly documented and restored, was the centerpiece of our first exhibition. Lost and Found, The Journey of Displaced Art. Victoria had played her part perfectly. She gave interviews about her awakening to the importance of art restitution, always crediting her brilliant daughter-in-law for opening her eyes. The society pages ate it up. James had found his own path too. He still ran the gallery, but now with a focus on emerging artists from marginalized communities. No more pressure to join Morgan Stanley. Ready for your speech? He asked, straightening my dress. Dire again. But this time one Victoria had insisted on buying me. Born ready. I looked out at the crowd of art world elites, many of whom had once dismissed me as a social climber. Now they were here to celebrate my expertise. Victoria approached, air-kissing my cheeks. Darling, the Guggenheim curator wants to discuss that possible Modigliani in their collection. I told him you're the only one qualified to authenticate it. Happy to help, Mother, I replied sweetly. We both knew this dance now. She played the supportive mother-in-law. I played the gracious daughter. The fact that it drove her crazy to need my approval only made it better. The foundation's work was real though. In our first 6 months, we'd identified 12 lost masterpieces and helped return them to their rightful places. Turned out Victoria's father-in-law had kept meticulous records of his acquisitions, including the original owners. He'd always intended them to be returned someday. As I took the podium to announce our latest discovery, a lost Van Gogh sketch found in a Buenos Aires vault, I caught Victoria watching me. The hostility was still there, buried under social grace, but now tempered with something like respect. She'd learned what I'd known all along. True value isn't in what you own, but in what you know. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's forcing your enemies to publicly acknowledge your worth. The Blackwood Foundation continues to grow. We've recovered millions in lost art and established new protocols for authentication and restitution. Victoria still chairs the board, though we all know who really runs things. James and I are expecting our first child, a girl. Victoria is already talking about her future as a proper Blackwood lady. I just smile and add another art history book to the nursery shelf. After all, knowledge is power. And in this family, power now speaks in brush strokes and authentication papers, not social connections and trust funds. Sometimes the best way to defeat those who underestimate you is to make them need your expertise. And sometimes, just sometimes, forcing someone to publicly praise what they once dismissed is the sweetest revenge of all. As for the Met board members who fired me, they now pay the Blackwood Foundation considerable consulting fees for my services. Victoria likes to negotiate the rates personally. Turns out she enjoys making other people pay for underestimating her family, even if that family includes the former gold digger who now authenticates their masterpieces. Art has a way of revealing truth. Sometimes it reveals lost masterpieces, sometimes it reveals character, and sometimes it reveals that the person they called an imposter was the expert all along.